Hey guys, so I just finished listening to the Emerging Schools Conference from Harvard, which I only found out about like 2 days ago, and it was so fascinating. I wish I had been there. And early this morning, there was a session on like how you hold schools accountable, different types of schools, microschools, hybrid schools, charter schools, all sorts of different emerging models of schools. And I kept thinking, you have to know what you're holding accountable to, right? Because there's a lot of talk on testing. What's the point of the school? Well, if you have standardized tests, you can see if the kids can read, if they can do certain math problems, at least look like they can on the test. So the terminology was just kind of being thrown around. And I thought, but how do you even measure education, right? And I didn't know what the agenda was. The very next session was very philosophical, which I dearly love. What is the point of education? And it was very fascinating to listen to these people discussing this question, because it was just coming down around and around this same question of like, I'm climbing uphill here. We have to back up and figure out why we have schools, what education is for, and what it is we're even measuring, and if that's even measuring true education, right? And I was like, I'm so glad they're asking this question, because this is something that I often think about, because what's the point of the school in the first place? What's the point of standardized assessments? What's the point of accreditation if you don't know why your school exists? And it was very interesting to hear some of the people talking about the humanness of education, helping the child become a human, helping the child become part of the larger community. Charlotte Mason talks about the personhood of children in education, right? And I feel like this word human and the word personhood are really talking about the same thing. The fact that a child, an adult, is a person, is a human. They're not a computer. They're not a factory worker. They're not a productivity machine, right? They're actually a person. They were talking about things like living a happy life, fulfillment, purpose, right? And how do you measure that in schools? And it seemed like you can't really. Not really, right? Could you measure how happy someone's metric is when they're 25 and 35 and 45? Well, if you could, and then you could to look back and say, well, what kind of schooling did they get? Is there a correlation between the kind of schooling you get and your happiness purpose factor as an adult? Well, that would be cool, right? But that's a pretty long study. But that really did seem to be a lot of what the conclusion kind of was, if you could say that there was a conclusion, because when you really get someone cornered into what education is, it's life, right? It's a life. It's setting you up for life, right? Relationships with other people, curiosity about your environment, open-mindedness, but also conviction, morality. There was questions on religion, and it was really fascinating to listen to. I encourage you to check it out. Charlotte Mason talked about all of this, right, over a century ago, and nothing has really changed. There was even some conversation about like AI and computers, and something about if our teacher's going to become obsolete. And if you say, well, if education is just, and schooling is just like getting a child to be able to like perform a certain activity, like do a math problem, or even, phonetically learn how to sound out words, teachers could become obsolete, right? But if education is relational, if it's human, if it's personhood, you can't get rid of people, right? And I found it was like very ironic that 20, 30 years ago, and still up till this day, although less so, I think, the big criticism of homeschooling was, what about socialization? What about socialization? And homeschoolers would push back and say socialization isn't just sitting in a classroom with a bunch of your peers listening to a teacher, okay? However, there is some legitimacy to the question, because socialization, if you really ask what that word means, well, truly what it should mean is learning to emotional and social behaviors with other humans, right? So it might be listening to authority, but it's also working through things. It's openness with people around you. It's seeing other viewpoints. All of that is really important. And public schools, private schools, homeschools can all mess it up. They can all mess it up, right? So if true education includes that kind of socialization, you need people, you need conversations, and that's never going to go away. AI is never going to replace that human element, and if it does, then we're really in trouble. So I found it really fascinating to put together what these people are saying, and when I smirked a couple of times, because smirked might be a strong negative word, but I kind of half laughed, because I was like, this person is, and I agreed, but they were trying to articulate, like, if we're going to talk about standards, and we're going to talk about accreditation, and we're going to talk about even public money going to these different schools and ESAs and all of this stuff, it's very easy to get bogged down in the school performance and accountability measures and all of this. And can we even go to these schools? Would they even be able to answer the question, why do we exist? What is education? And one of the panel members said, if you corner teachers, in his experience, you corner teachers and you ask them why they're teaching what they're teaching, and they'll say, well, I'm teaching because I'm teaching chemistry, I'm teaching so my students can do math. This is what he said. I'm sure there's other teachers who wouldn't answer that question that way, but this was what he said. And then others, if you press them, well, they forget it. Most adults forget all of this stuff. So what are you teaching? Well, we're teaching critical thinking skills. He said that ends up being the the final answer. And it was just very interesting to hear an observation that schools maybe can't articulate this. And I found that this was true even when I was considering, during a very burned out period of my life, even after I had started Mason Hybrid School. And it was a very difficult decision, but I was visiting some local Christian schools, and because I felt like I needed to send one of my kids there so I could get a break from, not from that child, but from just all of it. And even the local Christian schools couldn't articulate why they used the curriculum that they used. And having been someone who built, a hybrid school that was built almost entirely on a particular philosophy of education, and all the scheduling and the curriculum and everything was informed by a very articulated philosophy. I wrote the mission statement. This was painful for me because I knew that the Christian schools probably would articulate that they were Christian, right? And it was religious, but why they used the history books they used, the science books they used, the phonics, one of the head of schools couldn't even tell me what was used. He had to go ask a teacher what they used, which, that's okay. They don't have to micromanage every single thing. But he should have been able to articulate it maybe a little better. I felt like I was a little discouraged by that. And in public schools, of course, you see the same thing. It's very encouraging to have a panel of people talking about this and being able to point out that we have to know why we're educating. And then the conversation then went on to like accountability and whether accountability, what it even is, and who we're accountable to, and can we really trust parents to make that decision. And man, it's a very different conversation in that room that I wish I had physically been in than the conversations when I was in ed leadership almost 20 years ago at Lehigh, and I was told that I was brave for talking about school choice, which I naively didn't know that I was when I did a presentation on school choice almost 20 years ago, because it was such an adversarial environment to talk about school choice in that place. It was very, very much about public funding and unions and all of that, and it was just there was no conversation about school choice that I was experiencing at all. I was the only person, my little non-teacher self in the program, who was talking about it. So it's very encouraging to see these panels and these conversations and people saying, oh, we're done with that conversation. We already know where we're going with this. School choice is already winning. Now it's just a matter of how we take it forward from here. So I wanted to share that with you. Charlotte Mason was on it 100 years ago. And it's just something that I am very encouraged to see. and let me know in the comments what you have seen, what you've observed, and if that is anything that you've had personal experience with your schools or conversations around it. And yeah,